because I was raised like many of you in church. The tendency is to equalize the importance of everything in the Bible, or to equate the importance of everything in the Bible. So if it's in the Bible, everything is equally inspired, and consequently, it is equally important. But that is not the case. And that's what we're going to discover today. In fact, that's what we're going to discover for the rest of this series. The events, and this is so important, especially if you're raising kids, you're raising kids in church. The events recorded in the Gospels, by the Gospels, we're talking about the life of Jesus as recorded by Matthew, the life of Jesus as recorded by Mark, the life of Jesus as recorded by Luke, the life of Jesus as recorded by John. Did you ever wonder, why do we have four versions of the same story? We only have one version of the parting of the Red Sea, one version of David and Goliath, one version of Noah, but we get to Jesus. Why do we have four versions of the same life? Because the events recorded in the Gospels are not Bible stories. But the events recorded in the Gospels are oftentimes reduced to simply Bible stories, which equates Jesus' story with all the other stories in the Bible. But Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are not Bible stories about Jesus. The Gospels document Jesus' explanation of what God is like. And as obvious as that should be, it is not obvious for many of us, and it is not obvious to many in the church, because again, the way that pastors, and I'm knocking my own, job and my own, the people like me, so I can do this. The problem is the way that pastors use and refer to the Bible. The problem is not the Bible. The problem is the way that the Bible is often positioned and taught, because when we equate the importance of everything in the Bible, when we say, since it's all inspired, it is all equally important, we unintentionally, and I think it's always unintentional, we unintentionally negate or minimize the unique purpose of Jesus, not the purpose of his death, the purpose of his life. As John would say, opening his gospel, that the Logos, the Word, God, came and dwelled with us. He camped out with us. He pitched his tent with us. He came to live among us so that we could know, not Bible stories, we get to know what the Father is like. But this isn't the mistake that we make. We equalize, we equate everything. And Jesus is like, no. And I'll tell you who didn't make that mistake. Unfortunately, Christian traditions make this mistake all the time. In fact, some of you are listening and go, wait, well, you're kind of throwing me out of whack. I'll tell you who did not make this mistake. And this is why we should take this seriously. The person who didn't make this mistake is actually a Pharisee who was absolutely 100% committed to Torah, who grew up under the Old Covenant and then abandoned the Old Covenant for the New Covenant that Jesus established. He lived under both covenants. The Apostle Paul begs first century Christians, don't make the mistake of equating everything in our scriptures with what has just happened among us. Because everything that came before, and this is the Apostle Paul, a Pharisee, not just a Pharisee, he claimed to be the best Pharisee that, in his generation. Self-esteem was not a problem for the Apostle Paul, apparently. But anyway, he claimed to be not just a Pharisee, but a well-trained, educated Pharisee. And he's like, look, if anybody knows Torah, I know Torah. If anybody has a vision of God as described in Torah and through the prophets, it's me. But I'm telling you, something new has happened. Someone new has come. God has revealed himself as he's never revealed himself before. If we want to know what God is like, we don't have to look back that far, because he showed up among us. And everything that came before, he'd say, those were just shadows of the things to come. And while you can tell some things about a thing from its shadow, you can't tell everything. Shadows are like amazing. We don't have an account of his life. We have four, because the life of Jesus is by far the most important literature in the Bible. It's all inspired. It's not all equally important. And everybody who lived in the first century who met Jesus understood that. Not because what came before was inaccurate. It just wasn't complete. You won't know, as smart as you are, and as insightful as you are, and as much life experience as you've had, you won't know what the Father is like until you take the time to discover what Jesus is like. And you'll get the clearest picture of Jesus by following Jesus through the Gospels.